It was a chilly morning at the bus stop, the kind where the cold air seemed to make everyone a little more irritable. People stood scattered, some checking their phones, others just waiting silently for the next bus. Among them was a quiet man, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn jacket, his posture calm and steady. He kept to himself, his eyes scanning the ground, lost in thought. He didn't draw much attention, at least at first. But then, out of nowhere, a group of loud, smug individuals started cracking jokes. Their laughter was sharp, their words even sharper. They looked at the man, sizing him up, clearly mistaking his silence for weakness. One of them made a snide remark, that another joined in, their words laced with condescension. The man didn't react at first, barely lifting his gaze. But there was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that hinted at a deeper story. The insults continued, growing bolder, louder, trying to provoke him. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed, was that this seemingly ordinary man had spent years as a Marine. He wasn't just trained. He was battle-hardened, disciplined, and unshakable. And while he stayed calm for now, there was a line they were dangerously close to crossing. What happened next would change the way everyone at that bus stop saw him forever. The man adjusted the strap of his backpack, still not saying a word. His silence only seemed to encourage the group. One of them, a tall man with a smirk that reeked of arrogance, stepped closer. "What's the matter, big guy? Cat got your tongue," he said, his voice loud enough to make others at the bus stop glance over uneasily. But the quiet man didn't flinch. He kept his eyes steady, calm as a still lake. Those who noticed him closely might have seen something else. A flicker of patience being tested, the kind of restraint that takes years to master. He wasn't ignoring them out of fear. It was something else, something deeper. What no one there could have known was the kind of life this man had lived. Long before this cold morning at the bus stop, he had faced far greater challenges than a few taunts. He had stood on the front lines of danger, learned the value of self-control in situations where even a split second of emotion could mean life or death. But those memories stayed locked behind his calm demeanor, revealing nothing to the world around him. The group, oblivious to who they were dealing with, kept at it. Their laughter echoed, drawing more attention. And yet there was an unshakable feeling that something was about to shift, something they weren't prepared for. The tall man's voice grew louder, and his words sharper, as if he were putting on a show for the small audience that had begun to gather. "What's the matter?" Too scared to talk. He taunted, stepping even closer to the quiet man. His friends laughed, egging him on. It was the kind of laughter that didn't just mock, it aimed to humiliate. The quiet man didn't respond, his face calm but his eyes steady and unblinking. A woman standing nearby shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the group and the silent figure. She wanted to intervene but hesitated. What could she do against this group? Others around her had the same uneasy thought, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. The tall man, now emboldened by what he thought was victory, crossed the line. He reached out and gave the quiet man a slight shove. It wasn't hard, just enough to test him. That was when something changed. The quiet man lifted his head slowly, locking eyes with his aggressor. His gaze wasn't angry, but there was something in it, a calm warning, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The air grew heavier, and the small crowd sensed it. Even the group seemed to pause for a moment, unsure of what they had just unleashed. But the tall man, unwilling to back down, smirked again. "What are you going to do about it, old man?" he sneered. What no one knew, what no one could see, was the battle happening inside the quiet man. Years of training had taught him control, restraint, and discipline. But restraint didn't mean he couldn't act. And now they had pushed just enough to awaken a part of him that had been dormant for years. The tension thickened, and for a moment, the entire bus stop felt like it was holding its breath. The quiet man slowly straightened his posture, his full height now obvious to everyone watching. For the first time, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You really don't want to do this," he said, his words measured but carrying a weight that made even the loudest member of the group falter. The tone wasn't a threat, it was a warning, a chance for them to walk away. But the tall man laughed, brushing it off. "Oh, I'm shaking," he said mockingly, turning to his friends for approval. They laughed too, but it was nervous now, uncertain. Something about the quiet man's presence had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Even the onlookers, who had been pretending not to notice, couldn't look away. The tall man reached out again, this time more aggressively. But before his hand could make contact, the quiet man stepped back with precision, avoiding him completely. It wasn't flashy, just quick and controlled, almost like a reflex. The movement caught everyone off guard, especially the tall man, who stumbled slightly from his own momentum. The quiet man didn't move any closer, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he held the tall man's gaze, steady and unyielding. It was the kind of stare that stripped away the bravado and posturing, forcing the other person to confront what they were doing. "This is your last chance," the quiet man said, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge now, like a blade unsheathed. The tall man hesitated, his confidence faltering for the first time. His friends exchanged glances, clearly unsure if they should continue. The crowd around them seemed frozen, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. No one dared to move or speak, their eyes locked on the standoff unfolding before them. Then a faint sound broke the silence, the rumble of the approaching bus in the distance. But even that wasn't enough to break the moment. Everyone was still waiting, holding their breath to see what would happen next. The tall man clenched his fists, his pride battling with the growing doubt in his eyes. And the quiet man remained still, like a mountain, calm, strong, and immovable. The moment teetered on the edge, one wrong move away from exploding into something no one could predict. The bus's engine grew louder, its headlights cutting through the cold morning air as it approached the stop. For a brief moment, it seemed like the confrontation might end right there. The tall man's hesitation was clear now, and his friends were no longer cheering him on. Some of them had even started taking small steps back, sensing this was more than they'd bargained for. The crowd's anticipation hung in the air, thick and unrelenting. But just as the quiet man's words seemed to sink in, the situation took an unexpected turn. From the back of the group, a smaller, wiry man, clearly trying to prove himself, suddenly stepped forward. "Come on, man," he said, glaring at the quiet figure. "Don't let him scare you. He's just standing there, trying to act tough." His voice was sharp and full of misplaced confidence, his movements jittery as if he had something to prove. He reached into his pocket, pulling out something small, metal glinting briefly in the dim light. It wasn't a weapon, but the sight of it, a keychain, swung menacingly like a makeshift tool, sent ripples of alarm through the crowd. People shifted nervously, whispering to each other, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. The quiet man's eyes flicked to the movement, his expression still calm, but sharper now, more alert. He took a small step forward, just enough to place himself between the group and the rest of the crowd. It wasn't an aggressive move, it was protective, deliberate. "You really don't want to do that," he said again, his voice firmer this time. But the wiry man was too caught up in the moment, too eager to prove himself. "What are you gonna do?" he sneered, swinging the keychain lightly, testing the waters. The tall man, emboldened by his friend's sudden display, smirked again, his earlier doubt melting away. Yeah, let's see what you've got, he said, his voice loud, trying to regain control of the situation. The bus was almost at the stop now, its brakes hissing as it began to slow down. But no one was looking at the bus. All eyes were locked on the scene unfolding in front of them, tension building with every passing second. The wiry man took a step closer, raising the keychain slightly, and the crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. The quiet man's stance shifted ever so slightly, his movements almost imperceptible, but anyone paying attention would see it. He wasn't just standing there anymore. He was ready. The wiry man lunged forward, swinging the keychain in an arc, his movements clumsy but quick. The crowd gasped, some taking a step back, others frozen in place. But the quiet man moved faster than anyone could have imagined. In one fluid motion, he sidestepped the swing and grabbed the man's wrist with a precision that spoke of years of training. His grip was firm but controlled, stopping the motion cold. The tall man and his friends took a step back, their bravado now replaced with uncertainty. The quiet man released the wiry man's wrist and stepped away, still calm, still composed. He turned to the tall man, his gaze unwavering. "It's not too late to stop," he said simply. "Walk away while you still can." The tall man hesitated, his pride and fear warring within him. The bus doors hissed open behind them, and for a moment, it seemed like they might actually leave. But then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, an older man's voice cut through the tension. "You've done enough," the voice said firmly, yet kindly. The quiet man turned, surprised to see an elderly man stepping forward, leaning on a cane. The older man looked at him, his eyes sharp and knowing. "You've got nothing to prove," he said softly, almost like he understood something no one else did. The quiet man gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in the words. The tall man, embarrassed and unsure of what to do, muttered something under his breath before motioning for his friends to follow him. They shuffled away quickly, their earlier bravado now replaced with quiet defeat. The wiry man stumbled after them, clutching his wrist, avoiding everyone's eyes. As the bus passengers began boarding, the quiet man lingered behind, his calm demeanor still intact. A few people nodded at him in quiet thanks, though no one said much. The older man with the cane approached him, offering a faint smile. "You carry yourself like someone who's seen a lot," he said. The quiet man gave a small, almost imperceptible smile and replied, just trying to keep the peace. As the bus pulled away, the quiet man remained at the stop, watching it disappear down the road. He glanced at the now empty street, the tension of the moment replaced by a peaceful stillness. But as he turned to leave, the older man's voice called after him one last time. "Semper Fi, Marine," he said with a knowing nod. The quiet man paused, looking back for a brief moment. His expression softened, and for the first time, there was a hint of a smile. Without a word, he nodded back and walked away, leaving behind a story no one at that bus stop would ever forget. The quiet man walked down the sidewalk, his steady steps blending into the rhythm of the morning. The street felt calmer now, as if the tension that had gripped it earlier had dissolved into the crisp air. People at the bus stop slowly began to disperse, murmuring to one another about what they had just witnessed. Some glanced in the direction he had gone, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. The older man with the cane remained for a moment, watching him fade into the distance. There was a sense of respect in his gaze, as if he understood the weight the quiet man carried, the discipline, the restraint, and the wisdom that comes from years of hard-earned experience. "Not all heroes wear uniforms," he muttered to himself before turning to board the next bus. For the quiet man, it was just another day. His actions weren't about making a statement or seeking recognition. They were rooted in something deeper, a commitment to doing what was right and standing firm in the face of adversity. As he turned a corner and disappeared into the city's hum, those who had been there knew they had witnessed something rare, the strength of a man who needed no words to command respect. His silence spoke louder than any insult ever could.